Ready.
Okay, stand by.
My name is Robbie Fusella, and today's date is Tuesday, November 8th, 2011. I'm interviewing Staff Sergeant Kevin Frantz at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, about his life and military service. Okay, so just to start off, where were you born?
I was born in Santa Ana, California.
What was your hometown like?
It's a really big city, like Southern California. It's like the whole place is just one giant city. So it's just a lot different than everywhere else I've been because you never have a break of the population. It's just a huge metropolis.
Lots of things to do there?
A lot of things to do.
Could you tell me about your family?
My family, they were always there for me. They were very big on just family, like sporting events, anything. There would be someone there from the family. Like if we'd go anywhere, they would try and like at least make an appearance, do something, show that they care.
Are you married or have children?
Nope, no, not married.
Okay. Now, what were your reasons for joining?
I joined the military. It was one of those things that I've always had like in the back of my mind, that I went to college and was like, no, the military. Graduating high school was like, oh, the military. And then I was just at a point in my life where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I'm like, the military seems like a good idea right now.
Did you have any influences on that decision?
Not really. There was a couple people I knew that had prior military experience. A lot of my friends, they had it, and they always talked about how good it was for them and everything. So like, that's something I want to see.
Okay. Now, fast forwarding a little bit to now where you're actually in the military, what was basic training like?
Basic training is not like they show it at all in the movies or anything. They're not there to make you fail. They're just trying to make you into a soldier. They will teach you everything that you need to learn. They're not going to do anything, like they're not going to hit you. I mean, yes, you get yelled at, but that's just part of being in the military. If you can block that out and not worry about it, it's easy. It's really simple.
Okay. Now, while you were in basic training, did you know that you wanted to be a military police officer, or was that something new?
I knew, like, when you join, you get to select your MOS, and I was like, I want to be an MP, just because that was, from what I'd heard, that was one of the best professions out there. So the basic training was 9 weeks of basic training and then 10 weeks of military police skills.
Now, what makes it the best, you say?
I think just the diversity, because you not only do law enforcement, you do garrison work, but you also do combat support, where you don't have the high prestige of infantry going around kicking in doors, but you do that too, because you're just doing the same job, just with a different label, basically.
Now, you talked a little bit about the training. How did that differ from the basic training you had, being a military police officer?
Being military police, it basically differed because it was like a quick kind of police academy for about 3 weeks. They taught you about the law, how to operate patrol vehicles, how to do all of the law enforcement side, and then you would switch over and do combat as well, driving like convoys, working with weapon systems and everything.
Did you find anything difficult about the training?
The most difficult part was really dealing with the other people, because everyone's on different levels with everything. So it gets frustrating because you have people that don't care, that are just in it just to be in it, and you can tell by their attitude, and then you have to deal with them, and they get everyone else in trouble.
How did you deal with those soldiers who weren't a big part of it?
Dealing with them, it was just, you yelled at them, you tried to get them motivated to do what needed to be done, and you really couldn't do anything. You just had to deal with it. It's basically part of the Army life.
Could you think of an example, maybe someone you knew that this kind of happened with?
There was one time that you weren't allowed like candy or anything, and people they would sneak it back to their barracks. They would sneak candy, and then the drill sergeants would find it, and everyone would get in trouble. Everyone would get smoked, where they have to do push-ups and sit-ups, just like 30 minutes of straight physical tasks. And at the end of it, you're just like, why is this person doing it? They're not fat. It's not like they wanted candy. It's just that it was there and they took the opportunity.
Okay. Now, after training, what were some of your first experiences as being an MP?
My first experience was I was in processing, and they basically asked me if I wanted to deploy. I was like, sure, why not? Because I knew I was going to have to do it at some point. So I didn't really experience being an MP till about 2 weeks in, when I was almost in Iraq. They're like, oh, you're an MP, and people are like trying to stay away from you.
What did you do for those 2 weeks before you did become part of it?
Those 2 weeks was basically like in processing, getting all my issued equipment, getting medical, like making sure you had all your shots and everything, and just preparing yourself to go downrange.
And what time was this around?
This was March of 2006.
Okay. Now, when you were actually part of it, what was your typical day like? Your normal jobs?
Is this deployed or like in garrison back in the States?
Back in the States.
Back in the States, our typical day, it varies because we do different types of cycles, where if we're in our red cycle, we're working law enforcement, where our typical day could be from 5 in the morning till about 2 in the afternoon of patrolling Fort Leonard Wood, or it could be from 11 till 9 patrolling. Like every day is different. You always deal with different things. Or we could be going to ranges that day.
What are some of the things you do while you're patrolling? Anything you're looking for? Or?
It's basically just the same thing as a regular police officer. We'll do school zones. It's basically you're a crossing guard. You'll make sure the kids make it across the street safely, do speed enforcement, go to the busy roads, run radar on them, make sure no one's speeding, deal with traffic accidents. You kind of look for things that are just unusual, but it's hard because it's a military post. A lot of activity will be unusual.
Okay. Going back, you talked about different cycles. What are the cycles you go through? You mentioned red. What are the other ones?
There's red is where you do the law enforcement. There's amber where it's like classroom training. You do all your mandatory just PowerPoint briefs, you get all your mandatory training done. And then green cycle is the field training, where it's more like you're deployed, you go out, you spend a week in tents, you do ranges, you just do all kinds of things like it's the actual Army stuff.
Okay. Now, going into actually you being in the military, you were part of the 463rd Military Company. How did you become a part of that?
When I first got to Fort Leonard Wood, there was 2 military police companies, the 252nd and the 463rd. The 463rd was deployed, and they needed people because they recently had a couple soldiers get wounded downrange. So you go, hey, we need replacements. This one, would you like to join it? I was like, sure.
Okay. Now going back a little bit, you joined in 2005, and that was 2 years after the war in Iraq started. What was it like being in the military at that time?
It was different because people were still very much against the war in Iraq. I remember I went home on Christmas Eve while I was in basic training, and just driving around, you see signs, you see picketers, down with Iraq, down with the military. And it was just frustrating because you're doing something for your country, and there's people that don't like that.
How did that affect you?
It made me mad where you want to go up and be like, hey, what's your problem with me? But then you think about it, they don't have a problem with you, they just want to voice their opinion, and that's what we fight for, so that people can voice their opinions.
Could you think of any times where you saw this other than what you mentioned before?
There was another time I was in Washington where people were just talking trash on the military and things like that, and I was just sitting there, and one of my friends was like, are you getting mad? I was like, yeah, I'm getting mad, but this is their right. And then he said something to them, and they said something back, and I was like, hey, you know, you guys, you can say all you want, but I'm protecting your right to say this. So no matter what you say, it's invalid.
Now I'd like to go back to the 463rd. What was your rank when you were in that company?
I was a specialist when I first joined because I had college, so you can usually, with college, come in at a higher rank. So I was a specialist, and then I got promoted to sergeant after a couple of years.
What is a specialist? Could you explain that?
Specialist is basically the rank before an NCO where you know your job well enough that you're usually placed in charge of tasks, but you're not knowledgeable enough to be in charge of everything. It's like the little line right between a leader and the soldier.
Now, when you were part of the 463rd, what were some of the missions or duties that you had during that company?
The missions we had, basically we were doing police transition training with the local Iraqi police. We started out in Baghdad at 3 different police stations, and then we moved up to Camp Taji. We were in the Sabi al-Bor region and the East District. I don't remember what that was called though.
Okay. I'd like to go forward a little bit now. And you eventually became part of the 512th. What was that transition like?
That was very different because I'd been in the 463rd for about 5 years, my entire military career. I had a lot of great friends. I knew everybody in the company, and then I just had to switch to a new company. So it was getting to know how that company operates, everybody in it. It's the same company basically, but just the personnel and how they do things are different, so it requires some adjusting.
How did you adjust to it?
Just the first few days, just sat back, saw how everything operated, how they like to do things, ask a lot of questions, because that's the only way you're going to learn.
Okay. When you were part of this unit, did your MOS change?
The MOS has stayed the same. It's just I have more responsibilities because I'm in a different job title.
What were some of those responsibilities that changed?
I was a squad leader before, where I was just in charge of 12 soldiers, and now I'm a acting platoon sergeant, so I have 3 different squads that fall under me. So I have about 40 soldiers. So instead of just dealing with all of one squad's issues, I have 3 times as many that I have to account for.
How do you deal with that many issues?
It's just frustrating. You have to rely on your other NCOs, your officers. You have to just ask questions because every situation's different, everyone's different. You have to just ask for advice from people. There's people that have dealt with it before, so hopefully they can give some insight into it.
Now, while you were changing ranks, how did that affect your position as an MP?
It just made me more responsible for things. Going from specialist to sergeant is you go from just hanging out, doing what you're told, to basically making more orders or giving orders about things into a supervisory role, and it just continues on from there.
Now, when you currently are a staff sergeant, what are some of the things that influence your decisions for your soldiers?
Just their well-being, what they're going to get out of what we do, if they're going to have time off, if they can spend time with their families, and just making sure that they stay soldiers and active.
Now, you're in a leadership role. What do you think makes an effective leader?
Being an effective leader you have to know your soldiers, know what makes them work, what's troubling them. You have to be able to listen, but you have to be firm with them. You can't just let them get away with things, because then they're just going to walk all over you. So there's a lot of different aspects, but I think just being firm but also listening and caring about them.
Could you think of any examples where you had some of those unruly soldiers?
We had a soldier once who showed up and he just smelled of alcohol. And it's one of those things where you don't want to get him in trouble because he's a good soldier. He just went out and had too many drinks. But with our job, you're going to be out in the public, you're going to be interacting with people. You can't afford to be smelling like alcohol, because then everyone else can be like, oh, well, the MPs, they show up drunk to work. So he's a good guy, but you have to get him in trouble. Like, you have to be firm and say, no, what you did was wrong. You're going to face the punishment for it.
Okay. You spoke about that and being an effective leader. What are some characteristics you believe to be a part of that?
I think you have to be resilient. You can't be stressed easily because there's so many different things going on. You have to be able to motivate people. You have to be able to influence them to do what needs to be done.
How are you able to influence them?
You're able to influence them just by telling them by giving them a task and telling them what you hope to gain at the end, that there's always a certain reason, and they have to understand that. And you can't just say, hey, you guys, if you do this, you'll get a 4-day, because that's, okay, you get a 4-day weekend, but you can't always say that. Hey, you get this done, you can go to lunch. You give them a set time, something to accomplish, and if they do it, you give rewards when you can. You give them praise, hey, good job, you keep this up, we can send you the promotion board, things like that.
You spoke about the characteristics. How do you practice those?
I practice them just by trying to be generally like just a happy person, show them that these issues that are going on aren't bothering me, that you can work through it. Because if they see that you're stressed, that you're down about things, they're going to be like, well, he's down and he's in charge of us. Why should we be positive? So you just have to stay motivated about everything.
How do you keep yourself motivated when you're feeling that way?
It's kind of like an act sometimes, because you could have 30 different things going on with your soldiers, then things going on in your life, and then you just have to push through, be resilient about it. You can't let it get to you, because you know, hey, you know what? Especially in Fort Leonard Wood, hey, I'm in Fort Leonard Wood, I'm not getting shot at, I'm not getting blown up. Things could be worse right now.
Mm-hmm. Could you think of any examples where you had to do that acting?
Just about every few days, because we're high stress, high profile, very high visibility job, where you have soldiers that they do one little thing and everybody in the world knows. Like right now we're working the gates, the installation access control, where if you say the wrong thing to someone, they're going to report it up to somebody who's going to report it up, and then it comes back down, and then it goes all the way back down to us, where this person said that I couldn't come on post when I was smoking in my car. And you're just like, okay, whatever. You just got to push on with it, because it's not our job to make policies about that. We just have to enforce them.
Okay. You talked about it being high stress and high profile. What do you mean by that?
Being a military police, you're always out in the public's eye. If we do one thing wrong, there's going to be people that see it. Like we work crossing guards. If you're not there on time, someone's going to know. If you drive through a stoplight, people are going to know. They're like, these are the people that are enforcing the laws, but they can't follow the laws themselves.
Okay. Now, I'd like to go back and talk about some of the training, because you mentioned Iraq. What were your first impressions of that place?
My first impression of Iraq was kind of like, wow, this place is like nothing I've ever seen. I'd been to Mexico a few times when I was younger. It reminded me of that, just a lot like dirtier kind of. It was hard to describe.
Could you maybe explain a little bit more about what made it so different?
I think you don't really understand what they're saying. Their culture's completely different. There's not a whole lot common. Like driving down the street, you see hundreds of sheep just hanging there that have been slaughtered for food, and it just smells horrible, but that's just what they do. That's part of their culture. It's like, this is the worst smell I've ever had in my life, and they just continue on and don't even worry about it.
How did you transition into that, being part of such a different culture?
It was just, there wasn't a whole lot of transition. It was basically you're just thrown into it and you have to adjust. Like, you can't make fun of them for their religion and things like that, because that's why we're there, is to help them out. And the more problems we cause, the worse it's going to be for us.
What were some of the ways that you adjusted?
I adjusted, like, just talking to people, because I joined about 2 months after the unit had already been there. So you talk to them, you talk to the NCOs, the squad leaders, you find out really what's going on and how you deal with it. And then you can basically form your own opinion of everything.
Okay. Now, you trained Iraqis. What were the first impressions you had of them?
First impressions I had of them was they seem like uneducated. But they're not. It's just their different culture. They don't have the school system. They don't have everything that we have here. They don't all read and write, but they understand enough.
How did they respond to you?
They responded pretty positively. Like, a lot of them are generally happy to see us. There's a few that aren't, but that's usually based off of experiences they've had with us where people had been rude, people had done things to them. But most of the time they're happy, they'd shake our hand, they'd walk up, they'd bring us food, drinks, anything we needed.
How did you deal with the ones that had those bad experiences?
Those are the ones you had to keep an eye on because you knew that someone had wronged them in some way, and you just try to be friendly, offer them water, offer them food, try and get on their good side because you're here for them. And if those are the people that will tell you, hey, there's a bomb over here, hey, these guys live in that house, they're trying to attack you. They're the ones that you need to get to know, and so you just have to be friendly with them and treat them well.
Now, during training, let's say I'm an Iraqi soldier. Where do we start?
It just depended what we were doing. Like, it was a lot of law enforcement tasks. But, hey, when you set up a checkpoint, you need to have people here, here, and here. And it was just dealing with that, the language barrier, talking through the interpreter, because when you say one thing, he's going to translate it, but it might have a different meaning to them.
What are some of the first stages? Like, you're starting to train me. How do we start that?
It was a lot of just weapons is one of the first stages. Make sure that they always use their weapon correctly, that they don't harm other people. We try to teach them about the value of life.
What do you mean by value of life? How did you teach them that?
We just taught them that they can't fire indiscriminately. A lot of them, they have weapons, but they're not worried about what's behind their target. They would just shoot it off if they needed to. If someone's approaching them, they would just shoot at them. They wouldn't think, hey, there's a family behind them, I could hit them. There's people over here, I don't want to be shooting my weapon in their direction. It's like things like that.
How did you teach them that?
It was a lot of lectures where we said, hey, would you like it if your family was over here and someone was shooting at them? You have to use examples because they're not going to understand it any other way.
What are some of the, maybe, I guess you could call middle stages of training?
Middle stages, a lot of like actual law enforcement work, handcuffing, like getting people, just interviewing people, just dealing with the population in general, how to be polite no matter what they're saying to you, what they're doing to you. As long as they're not being aggressive and harming people, you have to be polite, and that's what we try to teach them.
How do you try to teach them that?
It's like scenario-based activities where you act like you're frustrated, you're in their face, you're yelling at them, where there's nothing illegal about that, but it's frustrating on the other side because you have someone just in your face belittling you, but you have to treat them with respect, and the only way to do that is practice.
Can you remember some specific times where you did that type of training?
Only a couple times where we would get a group of the police, get them out there and just be like, hey, you guys have to do this, and we would have a couple of us or other people just get in their face and just annoy them and just see how they acted.
Did you get to know any of those soldiers personally by name?
I did. There was about 4 or 5 that we knew and we were pretty close with. I don't remember their names anymore, but they seemed like good people at the time. I don't know if they actually were.
Okay. Now, you spoke about training. What were some of the main challenges in training them? You talked about getting them to be careful how they fire.
I think the main challenge was probably a language barrier, because like when you say something, it has to be translated through someone else, and they're paid to say what you're telling them, but that doesn't mean they're going to, because you can find out from someone else, no, that's not what he actually said to them. And just dealing with that, and plus the fact that every day you'd have new people, so it's not like you could do training one day and then continue on from that into another aspect, is you'd have to start over and do the same thing every day, and really it's like you never made progress.
How did that feel?
It was frustrating because you'd be there for about 2 weeks and every day would be a new group of people and you just have to keep doing the same thing, and when you think you're ready to advance, the next day they'd have more people there that hadn't done the training, and you just, okay, we've got to go back and do this again.
What was it like for them finishing the program? What were those stages like?
It was good for them. Like they were happy. They liked learning from us because we could teach them a lot. We'd have an embedded like police officer basically, and he would help us out with a lot of training. He would teach them a lot of aspects of being real police because they'd have 20, 30 years of actual experience.
It sounds like you taught them a lot. Was there anything that they taught you that you remember?
Not really, because we were too busy trying to train them. They taught us basically about their culture, their families, things like that.
Could you think of any examples or remember any?
Not really.
Okay. Now, while you were in Iraq, you were part of combat during 2006. What were some of your first experiences with that?
The first experience was basically getting shot at. You would just be driving down the street and you'd hear bullets flying by, or you'd hear gunshots. Every now and then something would hit your truck, and then you just continue on. I mean, we're in armored vehicles, so a little AK-47 is not going to do anything. It's the explosions and the IEDs we'd have to worry about.
When you first heard those shots, what was that like?
It was frightening because you're just brand new there and you just hear a shot. You're like, what am I supposed to do? And then they're like, nothing, we're safe. These bullets are not going to get through this vehicle.
Now, you engaged in combat in Baghdad and Taj.
Yes.
What was the combat like in Baghdad?
In Baghdad, it was really close cities where you had to be basically on the lookout for IEDs everywhere. There wasn't a whole lot of people shooting at us because there's people everywhere. But the IEDs, you had to be constantly on the lookout. If something looked suspicious, like bags on the ground or special rocks, then you dealt with that. In Taji, it was more like farmland, open areas, so there wasn't as many people. So you would get just shot at randomly, and there'd just be different signs of things. Like you could see a bag on the ground that looks like it's flour or something. It could have an IED in it.
How did you deal with those when you found something like that?
You called it up to hire, said, hey, we have this. We'd request the explosives ordnance team to come out and check it out because that's their job. We don't touch that. We're not experienced with it. And they would come out, decide whether it was a bomb or not, and blow it up typically.
Now, when you were in combat, what got you through it?
I think just that knowing at the end of it, I'd go home and get to live my life a little more, because every day you're there, you know about what time you're leaving. It's not like you're going to be there just until the war's over. You have a specific time frame of when you're coming back, and that's what you work towards.
Could you think of any examples where you had that thought?
There was my roommate at the time. He got hit by an IED. He ended up losing his leg, and it was just frustrating because there was nothing we could do about it. We wanted to go to the area where it was, but we were forbidden. They said, you guys can't go there. We don't want anything to happen. And what got me through was a week later, I was supposed to come home on leave. So I knew, hey, if I make it through these next 6 days, I can not have to deal with this for a little bit.
Now, going through those experiences, do you have any lingering effects from them?
Not really. None that I'm really aware of. Every now and then you hear a loud like explosion or just something and you look around, you have the jitters, but so far nothing's shown up.
Now, going to the 4th MEB, how do you feel about that company becoming a combat unit now?
I don't think it's really going to change a whole lot because from what we do law enforcement and combat support and combat type anyway, where it's for us, there's not much change because we're trained on 5 different aspects, and that's basically one of them was combat.
Did you notice any changes on base when this happened?
No, there wasn't really any changes. I didn't even really know about it till I saw it in the newspaper because their previous mission was dealing with chemicals and things. Once again, we didn't really deal with that. We were busy just doing law enforcement on Fort Leonard Wood, things like that. They go, hey, our mission's changed from dealing with this to combat. We're like, okay.
Now, going back to some of the Iraqi police that you trained, what are some of the similarities between you and differences you can tell between the American soldier and the Iraqi soldier?
Some of the differences is a lot of them were just doing it for a paycheck. They don't care about their country. They didn't care about other people. They just wanted the money. There would be the few that actually, they loved their country and they were doing it for them, but it's just completely different.
How can you tell that difference from someone who cares and someone who doesn't?
Just their attitude, like if they're supposed to be pulling a guard duty, if they're actively looking around, if they're scanning, if they're talking to the people, or if they're just sitting there sleeping, their weapon somewhere else where they can't reach it if something happens.
And what are some of the similarities?
I think some of the similarities are just that they probably didn't want to be there as much as we did, because a lot of us, we didn't want to be there, but we had a job to do, and I think they had the same concept. They were from different areas, different parts of Iraq. They'd be sent to a specific area. They don't want to be there. They had no family there, but they still had a job to do.
Now, going back to the past, this war has been compared to Vietnam. How do you feel about that comparison?
I think it's similar in some aspects because it's a lot of counterinsurgency where, yes, we went in and didn't have any major conflicts, any major fights, but it's a bunch of smaller battles where we're dealing with the population rather than a real military.
Okay. Now, going back to actually when the war started, when Bush made the announcement that American soldiers were going to invade in Iraq, what impact did that have on you?
That didn't really impact me that much. I was in college at the time. I wasn't really too worried about the world affairs. It was like, okay, we're invading Iraq, let's get rid of those guys. Like, I wasn't thinking of joining the military per se at that time. It was just, all right, Iraq, let's do it.
Now, going back to more current events, Obama wants to withdraw troops starting this year. How do you feel about that?
I think that's a good plan because in the difference that I saw in Iraq from 2006 to when I was there in 2008, things have changed drastically where we are not needed nearly as much. And a lot of the soldiers over there aren't really doing much. Our last couple months we spent there, we did layouts, we did PT, we didn't really do a specific job. We were just there in case they needed us, but they didn't.
What were some of the differences going from 2006 to 2008 that you mentioned?
It was like the place itself was a lot safer. In 2006, they hadn't done the surge yet. They hadn't started like little command posts out amongst the people. Everyone still lived on the FOBs. And then when we got there in 2008, it was the end of the surge. So there was troops everywhere. There was little patrol bases everywhere, but it was safer. We didn't really get attacked or anything our first 4 or 5 months there.
Could you explain what the surge is?
The surge was the plan to send an additional forces into the Baghdad area because they knew that that's the main city, that's the area that needed to be held, and if you win the people there. So they brought more troops in, and they, instead of living in their own areas, they had them live amongst the people. Like they'd have protected little checkpoints, patrol bases, but they were in the middle of the town where if the people needed to talk to them, they were right there. So they gained their trust by being there with them, helping them out with things. So the people would be like, hey, those guys over there, they're bad guys.
Now, going towards the ending of combat, how do you think this is going to kind of pan out? Do you think us leaving will be a good or a bad thing?
I think us leaving will be a good thing because they need to be on their own. They're not going to be able to survive as a country for 10, 15, hundreds of years if we stay there with them. they're going to have to do this on their own. We've shown them the way. We've been there for them. Now it's up to them to say whether they're going to succeed or not.
Do you think they're ready to be on their own?
I think so. Like, just the attitudes that I've seen from all their people there's no need really for us to be there anymore, and they understand that.
Now, I'm going to go into civic duty now. How has being in the military affected how you serve your community at home?
It's just a lot different because before you see something, you just kind of ignore it. You're just like, whatever, it's not my problem. But being in the military, it's kind of like you're helping people. So you see someone broken down on the side of the road, it's brought me more to, hey, I'm going to help them. Or these people, it's raining outside. Yeah, I don't know them, but I'm going to give them a ride in my car.
Have you done anything specific for your community other than, helping people out every so often?
A couple years ago, I helped coach the volleyball teams for the high school. They had the girls' club season was going on, and me and my friend, we volunteered. We didn't take any money, anything like that. We just donated our time to help prepare the girls for their seasons.
What was that like?
It was really enjoyable. Like, just getting to play a sport again was fun. Teaching them how to play and seeing how much people love the game.
Now, the values you've learned in the military, how have you seen those transfer into your personal life?
Just everything that I do is a lot different. Like, if you go to a restaurant and the waitresses make mistakes, they won't charge you for something, and you could get away with it. You could be like, hey, I didn't get charged for my steak or something, but that's not right. This is where they get their money from, and people make mistakes. So I'll be like, hey, you didn't charge me for this. Just things like that.
Now, going past your military career, what are some of your plans for the future?
My future is kind of wide open right now. There's a few opportunities. I'm trying to get into federal law enforcement, and there's another job that one of my friends knows people that do a lot of convoy securities for cargo ships in the Middle East dealing with piracy. So I'm going to try and get on board with that as well.
Do you see yourself being overseas or in America?
I think I'll be overseas probably.
Is there a reason why you would prefer to be there than working at home?
Not really. It's in the military, my first 4 years, I spent over half of that deployed overseas. And I've been home for about 2.5 years now. It's the longest time ever. And I'm just ready to go out and, like, kind of for a change, to go see a different part of the world now.
So you mentioned possibly being a policeman. What made you kind of think about that?
I've already have a lot of the training. It's the same. Just a lot of the stuff is different, where it's an easy transition from what we do to civilian side.
Does your family play a part in these decisions you make of whether you'd be overseas or home?
I talk with them, but they really don't, because I'm just trying to live my life away from them. As much as I love them and like having them around, sometimes they just get under my skin.
Okay. Before we close, is there anything about your life or military career that we haven't talked about that you'd like to let me know?
Nope.
Well, on behalf of myself, my family, and Ball State, I'd like to thank you for being a part of this project, and thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Nice job.